Hey everybody, it is time for another book review, and I'm going to have a poetry reading tonight. As promised, I grabbed that bottle of One Hope. I'm drinking red tonight, and it is funding therapy for children with autism. I get nothing from this company, but I will tell you that it is delicious. I hope everybody is well and safe at home. I thought I would do this review in reverse. I'm going to save the poetry reading for last. I will give you guys a sneak peek of what I'm reading right now, that I'll do a full review later. But I thought maybe if you wanted to pick it up for yourself and you can call me out on my review, maybe we can have a dialogue about it. I am reading Grit by Angela Duckworth. It was in my pile last time we talked. The Power of Passion and Perseverance. Excellent read so far. And I made some notes here. And I wanted to call out and give credit and my appreciation and true admiration for West Point cadets. So whether they went through the process, whether they were the initial applicants, whether they were nominated, whether they met all the standards, whether they were finally enrolled, whether they graduated, what have you. If you or a family member was at all part of the West Point Academy process or culture, what I am reading in this book, it takes some grit to get through. So let me give you guys a quick rundown of what that looks like. So 14,000 applicants are in their junior year of high school when they start this process. So 14,000. Of the 14,000, 4,000 get nominated. 2,500 will meet the academic and physical standards. And this is all running up to acceptance and enrollment, and only 1,200 will be enrolled. So you're talking about just over, a hair over 8.5% enrollment rate. And that doesn't go into the details of who completes the program, who actually graduates from the academy. So talking about grit, I think that's a great place to start. And it's truly well written. As you guys know, I always read the introduction. It's a way for me to level set with the author to get the right perspective. Angela talks about her upbringing and her father's influence on her, and it's truly remarkable how she turned that around and didn't necessarily leave it up here. She was able to overcome. So that in itself is a demonstration of grit. So if you guys want to pick this up, I do have a link in my Facebook feed for Amazon to grab this. You can look for that. I can repost it if we need. In any event, I'm reading this now, so if you want to grab it, we can read it together. That would be very cool. All right. Part 2 of tonight's book review is Trauma and Memory, Brain and Body in a Search for the Living Past. It's a practical guide for understanding and working with traumatic memory. Peter Levine, PhD. He has a few. I actually went in for The Body Remembers, but they didn't have it. So I grabbed this one. It's just as good. So as promised, I want to give you 2 examples that the author writes about in this book, that the doctor writes about, so you guys have an idea somewhat of his offering in these pages, because while many of us think, not me, there is some examples that I think apply to a lot of us. So what he talks about in terms of a traumatic event is that a traumatic event is not measured by the event itself. The traumatic event is measured by the element of surprise. And what you feel in the event by safety, fear, uncertainty, and the unknown. So elements of the surprise that are exacerbated by not feeling safe or not understanding what's happening. So he gives a great example of a pedestrian who is in an accident. So the pedestrian's walking through the crosswalk, and a car comes by and hits the pedestrian, knocks the pedestrian down in the street. This, to me, traumatic event. What makes it less of a traumatic event, or not so much of an event where the trauma is stored in the body, is that upon impact and hitting the ground, a witness to the accident runs over to the pedestrian. Now, the pedestrian is conscious, and the witness says to the pedestrian, "Sir, you've been in an accident. You were hit by a car. You're laying in this street. I am here with you. I'm going to stay with you. We've called for help, and I will not leave you until help is on its way." What could have been a terribly traumatic event for this individual, who was a pedestrian that was hit by a car, was if there was no witness. So had the pedestrian been hit by the vehicle and there was not a witness, and the person was laying there in the street wondering what just happened. Am I hurt? Where am I? Am I alone? Is somebody coming? Can I get up? Is it safe to get up? What just happened? These are the things that the brain starts to process. And because we are created for survival, the brain, as a result, will start to put into play things that have to make sense, where the reality of the situation isn't what the brain is starting to. The next example the doctor gives, which I really love, is a gentleman walking down the street. And it's a busy city street, downtown Manhattan, any, Center City, Philadelphia, Chicago. You're in the city, you're walking down the street, and there's people, right? So you're bobbing and weaving. And he literally bumps shoulders with someone and sees this person and has this strange familiarity to this person. This person's somewhat, he knows this person. But it's not a bad feeling. It's an awkward feeling, but he doesn't necessarily feel that for the person. He feels that for the encounter. Come to find out through interactions with this person and thinking, I know you, right? You've had this I know you. You're out of place for me. Come to find out they went to the same grade school. So we're talking 3rd, 4th grade. And the gentleman whose perspective of the story you have, walking down the street, who bumps into this other person and thinks, there's a commonality here. There's something that I know. Come to find out that he was bullied when he was in grade school, and this man that he's seeing all these years later on a city street is a child grown as a man who stood up to the bully when they were kids, and he had repressed that memory. It was traumatic, obviously. But what was so interesting from the brain-body connection of trauma was the person's perspective that we have, the victim of the bully. He knew there was something here. It wasn't a bad feeling that he had for that person, but there was kind of a not great, unsettled feeling that he had about the person. But it was more of the circumstance. So his body and his brain stored that, and when he saw the person, he knew there was a thing. So, long story short, they shared the memories, and it was a good experience in the end. And I guess the takeaway there is stand up to the bully. Okay, guys, tonight's main event, Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur, #1 New York Times bestseller. It It's a beautiful book. I have a ton of Post-its here. I even color coded my Post-its um, for the ones that I wanted to read to you. And then there are colored Post-its for ones that, as I read, I cried. The subject matter is heavy, but the way she writes is easy to absorb the words. It's just depending on where you are in life and who you know and love, it may hit you differently. In any event, it's poetry and prose about survival, the author's experience of violence, abuse, love, loss, and femininity. She experienced abuse by men in her family at a very early age. The book is divided into 4 chapters, which I think is fairly well done from the standpoint that you can follow her journey and her emotion through the 4 chapters. So the first chapter is the hurting, the second chapter is the loving, third chapter is the breaking, and the 4th chapter is the healing. I think most of us would relate very easily to the loving and the breaking. If you've been in a relationship ever with someone, man, woman, it cuts both ways, where there's always a wall. You think you've got the wall almost down, and something happens, and very quickly those bricks start to get built back up. That I think you can take away from chapters 2 and 3, the loving and the breaking. Very similar to a lot of relationship experiences in love that we have with someone, not a family member, but a romantic love. Where does the title Milk and Honey come from? I looked this up. I think I just took it for granted that it was something wholesome and sweet, that maybe milk was kind of that wholesome, maybe childhood, and the honey was more of the sweet nectar of adulthood. I was wrong.